Welcome back to Business Week here on Arise News. Now, joining me to review some of the week's big stories is Muktar Muhammed, the CEO of Finance with Muktar. Thank you for joining me and good to see you again. So I wanted us to start with a discussion on the new Afrigo domestic card that's being introduced by CBN. CBN has obviously been pushing a well-received, some would hope, financial inclusion agenda. What are your thoughts on what difference this is going to make?
For me, I don't see any difference. I think the CBN governor like being in the news. Maybe it's because it's just been in the news all the while with policies not driven to conclusion, because even after he launched it, he said more details will still come out. So definitely you need to give us details. Now, if you look at what they're trying to do, the domestic paid card, is that what Nigeria really need? I don't think we have problem when it comes to domestic card. If you talk about financial inclusion, we've had enough of financial inclusion. The POS terminal, the money agents, or in the rural area, they've not been able to drive the kind of financial inclusion that you say you're looking for. So now you are bringing in cards. How many rural people will be saved with going with card? We're thinking of payment system. CBN is supposed to be a regulator. You are the one that we have to apply for payment system. You give approval for payment system. Now you want to be a provider of payment system. And then you are saying, oh, you looked at China, you looked at India, and you say those are people. And you forget to tell us that India tried it, China has tried it, trying to go away from the big ones like from a MasterCard and VAT. Visa, they didn't succeed. They had to come back.
Well, I understand that argument, but surely if you introduce a card scheme that means more people will find different ways of payment, that can't necessarily be a bad thing, can it?
No, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but what kind of card are you using? Like, what Nigeria needs now, a card that can help them do business globally.
So we're not clear how integrated this card scheme is with the rest of the economy.
Nigerian banks, the banks that you are regulating, are beginning to look for payment systems that can be used all over Africa and even the world. Right. And here you are telling, you are now coming to restrict to domestic. They are building card payment system. That's why some of them have holding companies. In this holding company, they are now beginning to build a separate arm for payment systems, whereby they can be able to do payment. They tell you can do payment globally. We have come to the fintech era. There are people now that they are using fintech to be able to do payment all over the world. You are coming with a product that you say is only for domestic use, and you are targeting the rural people. I want to ask, how many of these rural people are even bankable yet? You have not even brought them into the banking space yet. Talk less of saying you are giving them domestic cards.
Of course, the devil will be in the detail. We certainly should be moving towards regionalization and globalization rather than, just focusing on the domestic market. So we'll see how that pans out. Chevron is doing a record-breaking 75 billion share buyback. And the company is about to announce a doubling of profits. I mean, this is really amazing because we've been talking about the global energy transition, but energy prices are still quite high, which is benefiting a lot of the global upstream oil and gas players and IOCs like Chevron. I mean, what are your thoughts on whether we'll see similar from other IOCs in the sector? Yeah,
we will see. You remember the Saudi indigenous oil company, Aramco, was the first people that came up with one profit, one of the largest profit they've ever had in the history of that company. I remember they've just listed 2 years ago. And also we saw Chevron, we saw Total, we saw Mobil, we even saw Shell. And like you rightly pointed out, this is due to the global energy price. Remember, the US president also at a point was saying that they have made so much money, they should bring down the cost of energy. So I think this is good news for shareholders. It's not so much of a good news for the consumers of these, because they are still trying to make more money. But I think for shareholders, this is good news. And when you begin to buy back your share, that tells you that you begin to tell investors that there is a lot of value in that share, in that company, even going forward. And now what we're saying is that when you see companies like Chevron that are also a player in the Nigerian market, you see Shell, you see Total, you see Mobil, you see them decline those kind of profit, and you begin to ask yourself, what is happening to my own country that seems to be one of the largest producers of this same crude oil that these companies are benefiting from here. So you begin to ask yourself, if a company like Chevron is doing about 75 billion share buyback, $1 billion, and my reserve in Nigeria is still hovering between 39 billion. It's a lot of things.
And you know, that's a really interesting point, because many of these companies, obviously in the last decade or two, have actually divested from Nigeria, in parts of Nigeria. But yet, so the question is, perhaps we're not as important as we think in the global game. And then Chevron is investing $17 billion in new oil and gas projects. I mean, that's really interesting because we are trying to attract investment in the oil and gas sector. They've divested, they're still declaring profits. So obviously doing very well without a huge weighting of Nigerian assets in the portfolio.
Definitely, they are doing very well. You hit the new energy. And here we have our own Nigerian Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, are thinking of still doing investment in the normal crude oil, discovery of more crude. None of us are thinking about renewable energy. They are putting in most of the profit for development of new oil block, while people like companies like Chevron are going beyond that, looking at renewable energy. From their profit, they are beginning to put it into renewable energy. But we from our own profit or tax that NNPC will make it is diversing it into discovering more oil wells. So you see, it's all about the vision. It's all about being a global player. It's all about looking at the future and realizing that renewable energy is the new energy for the future. And I don't think we should be an exception from that. So, but you've hit it also by saying that these people are looking at their future and beginning to invest in key areas to drive growth. And that is why they are giving investors more confidence that we can still give you about 75 billion share buyback. And we are not going to be buying at the price that you bought it at that time. And yet we're investing for the future.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, a lot of companies in Nigeria and NNPC Limited are looking at investing in gas. Gas is still a very important transition fuel. And it's not clear that even big IOCs like Chevron will necessarily pivot into renewable energy. But this is such an interesting story because oil prices have obviously, on the one hand, been a pain point for consumers. But on the other hand, for those who are producing and exporting and selling, it's a major windfall for them.
It's a windfall, all in Nigeria.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that pans out. So the next story I wanted us to look at was UK. It seems like consumer confidence is somewhat picking up again. And what is really interesting about this is everybody was predicting, a third of the world, global recession, IMF said it. But a lot of economies have actually shown some signs of positive turnarounds insofar as the key economic indicators are. What are your thoughts with this?
Yeah, what you see in the UK playing out is monetary policy doing what they have to do, fiscal side doing what they have to do. Now, with high inflation, price of goods and services gone up, what you saw is that the government increase salaries by almost 6% depending on the sectors. So that gives them a lot of liquidity to begin to also be able to go into the market to buy things that normally they need to use. And if you look at from that same report, you realize that they are not just buying everything. Now they are buying what they need and reduction in it. So it's the confidence is that it's better than what was obtained sometime last year. The confidence is coming back, but they are not buying like they used to buy before. But again, it all boils down to the fiscal side, saying, okay, there's inflation, there's interest rate hike. What do? We increase salary, and then they're also looking at the reduction in terms of their power. The government are paying part of those power, especially during winter. So definitely seeing the synergy between the monetary and the physical side playing up in consumer and confidence.
And we saw here, of course, that over the Christmas into New Year period, bonuses and extra payments, payouts from employers actually then helped to support consumer sentiment. But if you look at an economy like the UK, we've seen some of the spillover effects of Brexit, of COVID. We're seeing union strikes in recent times. So from an investment perspective, what are your thoughts on the UK economy, potentially as an attractive destination for investors?
What you're looking at the UK economy is that they are looking for new investors. They seem to stand alone because they are not with the European Union. So the only place they are looking at is the Commonwealth of Nations. And like Nigeria and Africa, just this week they came up with a proposal that 99% tariff reduction from goods that will be imported from these 37 countries, and Nigeria is inclusive. So they are looking at ways to bring confidence back to their economy, giving people incentive, giving companies incentive, giving countries incentive to come into the economy because they know they stand alone compared to the European Union that are like a bloc. They seem to be standing alone. So definitely that's the way they are trying to boost their own economy because they have to they have to bring something that you don't get anywhere to attract investors into those economy. And I think by and large, they are doing well in that area.
Yeah, interesting. So this story in Cape Town around the authorities, the National Treasury permitting the city of Cape Town to actually buy electricity from consumers and businesses. Cape Town is really trying to innovate in the area of energy access here. What are your thoughts on this initiative?
I think that has to do because they are not able to provide so much power for them any longer. So, and the industrial area seems to suffer. So they are looking at, it's more or less like rationing. So instead of there was a riot as regard power sharing. So now if you, the consumer, are the one giving up part of your power, so that the industrial area will be able to have enough power and there will not be job losses. So basically is you have to give something to get something. Basically that's what they are doing. And they are looking at that area also. They are looking at privatization of their sector also to bring in foreign players also, just like what we had in Nigeria, even if you say it's not really working very well. The government seems to be the largest energy producer in South Africa. They are trying to diversify their investment and bringing in other players to come into that sector. But then again, they are starting a new thing that has never been done. Consumer themselves saying, okay, I don't need so much of this energy. I'm going to give you part of this energy because not all of them need the amount of energy they get, and depending on the times you are at home. So it's just another creative way of tackling the issue of power shortage.
Yeah, we obviously need more of those creative solutions, not just in South Africa, but in Nigeria and across the continent. So, I was talking to you about how we've flogged the topic of tech and AI. Everybody just seems to be talking about it. But Microsoft are not holding back. They've just invested an additional $10 billion in ChatGPT. This is on top of initial investments they made in 2019, 2021. They clearly think this is the future.
Of course, it's the future.
It is.
It is the future. Apple has done that. Google is doing that. It's the future, and they don't want to be left. I remember that before Apple came with their product, their iPhone, and we have a single device, do all these things. Somebody, they recommended it to Microsoft at that time. So Microsoft was the biggest tech company. And they didn't think it was possible. And here we had an Apple company through the innovation of Steve Jobs, went ahead and did that. And today they become one of the giants. I think they don't want to lose out. They are learning from maybe they are learning from their mistake or learning from experience. So they want to be part of that. And I think that's a big decision.
But are you at all concerned? I mean, the pace at which these investments are moving, are you at all concerned about maybe some of the antitrust legislation? Is Microsoft here building a conglomerate or monopoly of sorts around the artificial intelligence ecosystem? Could this be picked up by the regulators? It's
up to the regulators how they look at it. And I mean, if you are going to pick up Microsoft, you have to pick up Google. Google also, are you going to pick up Apple also? Because they are also global players, and also they are trying to improve on artificial intelligence. Remember, Google seems to be one of the biggest in terms of artificial intelligence, and they are a global player. So I think Microsoft is even trying to catch up. Apple has not even started yet. So definitely they're investing into those sectors. Some of them are doing it within their company, not buying into other companies. But compared to Microsoft is looking at a bigger way of investing, buying into some of those companies that are already into artificial intelligence. Remember, this company that they are buying into was just established in 2015. And also, not to forget that part of the owners of this company, the investors in this company, is a certain man that have Tesla.
Yeah. Elon Musk. Of course, we know. And you make a really interesting point, because these investments might eventually lead to an actual takeover. Eventually, Microsoft might subsume ChatGPT. Have you used ChatGPT at all?
No, not yet.
Yeah, because the figures say here, more than 1 million users in a matter of days at launch. I mean, it's been quite the phenomenon around the world, but very, very interesting conversation. Thanks so much for joining us on today's show.
My pleasure.
Muhammed, CEO of Finance with Muktar.